Modules 7 and 9, sentence fragments. Let's first define a sentence fragment. A sentence must have a subject and a complete main verb. If the subject or the complete or the main verb is missing, or even a part of the main verb is missing, the word group is considered a sentence fragment. Essentially, it's an incomplete sentence. Let's look at several examples. Fragment example number 1. In these sentences, there's an incomplete main verb. So both these sentences are incorrect. They are sentence fragments. The first sentence, Mark studying last night. Studying is a main verb. And Mark, in this sentence, is the subject. However, the main verb is missing a helper. In this case, we would have to add was for this to be an independent clause. As it is, it's a sentence fragment. Let's look at the second example. The students eating in the cafeteria. Here, eating is potentially the main verb, and students is the subject. However, in this sentence again, we're missing a helper for the verb eating. So you could add are, the students are eating in the cafeteria, or you could even make it past tense. Were, the students were eating in the cafeteria, or you can make it future tense. The students will be eating in the cafeteria. Either way, you have to add a helper verb to complete the main verb, to make it an independent clause. Let's look at another example of a fragment. In these cases, these sentences both are missing a subject and a main verb. The first example, if Joe seldom studies. Here, the word if tells us that this is a subordinate clause, because from parts of a sentence video, we learned that if is a subordinate conjunction. And subordinate conjunctions always begin a subordinate clause. And according to the parts of a sentence video, we learned that the main verb and the subject in the sentence cannot be part of a subordinate clause. We called it window dressing. Subordinate clauses are non-essential parts of the sentence in terms of structure. So this sentence needs a subject and a verb. So we could say, if Joe seldom studies, comma, he will not pass the course. So now, will pass is our verb, and he is our subject. So now we have a complete sentence. Similarly, in the second sentence, because Megan was ill. Again, because is a subordinate conjunction, and it indicates that we have a subordinate clause. So one of the rules, remember, we looked at in parts of a sentence was that when we see a subordinate conjunction, if you're wondering how large the subordinate clause is, keep going until you get to a punctuation mark. In this case, the period. And that whole word group is considered the subordinate clause. So again, we have to add a subject and a verb. Because Megan was ill, she missed the game. So missed here is the main verb, and the subject of this sentence is she. Now we have a complete sentence, an independent clause, because we have a subject and verb. The subordinate clause alone does not contain a subject and a verb, even though was could have potentially been the verb here, and Megan could have been the subject. Remember that subordinate clauses are window dressing. They are non-essential elements of a sentence in terms of structure. Now let's talk about subordinate clauses just to make sure we understand them. Subordinate clauses begin with a subordinate conjunction followed by a subject and a verb. Again, the subject and the main verb of a sentence cannot be part of a subordinate clause. A subordinate clause on its own is considered a sentence fragment because the sentence essentially does not have a subject or a main verb. Common subordinate conjunctions are although, because, if, since, unless, until, whenever, while. If you see one of these words, you know you have a subordinate clause. So for example, again, since Tom was working, period. That is a sentence fragment because the entire word group is a subordinate clause. It begins with a subordinate conjunction, since, and we have a subject and verb, but they are not the subject and main verb of the sentence. They are part of window dressing. Non-essential element of a sentence in terms of structure. Let's move on to another example. Fragment example number 3. Here we have no main verb at all. The first example, the book that he lost. What's happening in this sentence is we have a subject, book, and we also have a modifying word group, that he lost. Remember from our parts of a sentence video that word groups that start with that, which, who, or whom So we have a sentence fragment. We only have a subject here. We need a verb. So let's add John, the man wearing the blue shirt, ate his lunch. So here we have ate is now the main verb. The subject of the sentence, who ate? John. Ate. So John is the subject. We have a complete independent clause. So be sure, in summary, be sure you have a subject and a complete main verb, and you have an independent clause. Otherwise, if the subject is missing, or the verb is missing, or a part of the main verb is missing, you have a sentence fragment.